Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Land and Home Show. Today we are talking all about farm life. Hi, I'm Stephen J.B. Davis, your land specialist and residential realtor here in Central Kentucky. I'm beyond excited about the person sitting next to me. But he's going to tell you a lot about his life. I'm here in Fleming County, to be a little bit more precise, on a place called the Jerry's Farm. I'm here with Jerry Hicks. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for sitting here in front of a camera with me. Thank you. Start with who you are and tell us what you do.
Well, as you said, I'm Jerry Hicks. I'm half of the team here at the Jerry's Farm. I'm the primary farm manager and operator. A lot of times, as I was saying, I'm pretty much a one-man show. I do it all.
You're a super person, actually.
I mentioned earlier, farming's all I ever wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up on a farm, a subsistence farm in eastern Kentucky, and I enjoyed it. And I was convinced that it was all that I ever wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, my family, they come from a long line of farmers, and they didn't think it was a good choice. That there was better opportunities in other things.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked me into going to college. I went to school at Berea College in Berea, Kentucky. There's no tuition there, and everyone has to work to get through their college curriculum.
Very cool concept.
And my job, because I had some background because I was raised by my grandparents and I grew up really old-fashioned,
mm-hmm.
and doing a lot of really what's considered old-timey type stuff.
Which I'm very excited for you to talk more about.
So I went to work in what was called their Appalachian crafts.
Okay.
And I did everything from splitting rails and shingles, and I've made dulcimers, I've made fiddles and banjos and guitars. Wow. I've made spinning wheels. I've done spinning and weaving and all that type of handicraft type things. Did a lot of subsistence type things, was making a plow from scratch and, working on wagons and anything that would have been done in Appalachia prior to the 1920s or so.
Gotcha.
I've worked on. And that's what we did.
That was what that was all about. It wasn't just. Right. It was Appalachia before a certain period.
Right.
I see.
Right.
Okay.
It was mainly self-sufficiency, subsistence type.
Gotcha.
Things that people did, really before civilization.
Really started ramping up.
Yeah, before the road system and
yeah.
when Appalachia was still considered isolated.
Gotcha.
And a lot of these handicrafts, went back to Scotland and Ireland and England and.
Okay.
So it's
the mother countries.
Traditional type stuff,
Yeah.
So and I had a good grounding in that from the way we farmed at home.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, I was raised by my grandparents. My grandpa was born in 1917. Grandma was born in 1919. So about the time of the First World War. And my family never owned a tractor.
Can you tell people, is it true or false that you farm with a tractor on a regular basis? True or false?
Well, it's true.
You know what? Yeah, I forgot about that.
It's true now.
It's true now, yeah.
But I bought the first tractor that I ever used 7 years ago.
Ever used?
I had never driven a tractor. When I went and looked at my first tractor, I'm coming at this with the experience of I've driven a riding lawnmower. How hard can it be? And I've heard this said time and again. Here I've always farmed with horses and mules,
mm-hmm.
and any fool can drive a tractor. That's what I was always told.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different mindset. Well. When we, like I said, I grew up farming with draft animals. That's how my grandparents farmed, and we had always done that, and I liked it. And I was convinced that when I bought my own place, I was going to continue to farm that way. Well, we bought this place, and it didn't take me long to realize that it's a bigger farm than what a man and two horses can handle by himself.
Mm-hmm.
It's bigger than two men, two teams can handle
Yep.
by themselves. And that is the one thing about farming with draft animals is you're limited on a couple of things. You're limited on the scale that you can manage, or you have to throw more animals and larger equipment at it.
Sure.
And then you get into financial constraints and things like that.
So I just want to pause really quick.
Yep.
For those of you that don't understand maybe all the lingo, because you're just unfamiliar, and that's okay. Draft animals, we're talking mules. A mule is a
Right.
cross between a horse and a donkey.
Right.
Okay, so mules are very, very powerful. I've probably got some footage of Jerry's mules happening right now on the screen.
Right.
But he uses those animals to pull equipment that plows and tills and digs holes and stuff. So there's no, until recently, there were no tractors.
Right.
And so that's what he means by draft animals. These are animals that are fed to stay healthy so that they can actually do the work that now in more modern farming that tractors and other types of farming implements do. So that's draft animals.
A lot of people don't realize on a worldwide basis, more acreage is farmed worldwide by draft animals still today than is done by mechanized means.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you
I
get
didn't know
out
that.
you get out into other countries. I mean, we tend to think of, well, the way we do it is everybody does it. Everybody has a big tractor and
Mm-hmm.
a 10-bottom plow or whatever they use out west, and you know,
You just drive.
You just drive. Don't look back. You know, just drive. And that's not the case. Taking the world as a whole, and you can look this up. That more land is.
And there are plenty of people on YouTube who will do that.
Right. And it's not just. And there again, it's not just horses and mules. You get into countries where they're still farming with buffalo and oxen and camels and reindeer, and just
Whatever the big animal is they've got, they're using what they have and where they are.
Right. Speaking globally, there is more acreage worked by draft traction than by mechanized machinery. And even, I made the switch, like I said, 7 years ago. I felt like it was out of necessity at the time. And now, 7 years down the road, looking back on it, I think I should have given it a little more thought and a little more consideration, and I probably would not have bought the tractor. And now I'm actually moving away from the tractor. And it's not just, here we are with $5 diesel. That's not it. Looking at the amount of work that I can get done with the tractor, $5 diesel is still, that's still a low cost compared to what all you can get done.
Sure.
But with me, there's more important issues with it than how much I can get done, how quickly. I feel like, my mules are better for the land, and they're better for me.
Yep.
I've mentioned earlier I'd had trouble with high blood pressure and all this sort of stuff, and I know I feel better when I'm working with my mules, and there's a lot of things that I can get done with mules that would not be possible with a tractor, the way that I work with my team.
One of the reasons, folks, why I'm making this video is because you'll see a lot of people. I always tell you all that I'm not a farmer. I just have an immense respect and deep appreciation for them, and it's my business too. And also, a lot of you watching, you have some sort of designs to live some type of rural life, and my intent, especially in making Jerry the very first of this series of people, is that he does it in the most what would you call it? I don't want to say tried and true, because that makes it sound like other ways of farming are bad, but
right.
the most original way that we've ever really farmed in this country, and I think it's a good starting point. And it's also, we'll talk a little bit later about just what all goes into farming, regardless of if you're going to do it with mules or if you're going to do it with a tractor. But a good place to start with someone who's been doing it for, you've been in agriculture since you were a boy.
Yep.
You haven't always had an agricultural job, but
no.
You've been in agriculture almost your entire walking life.
Right, yeah. I grew up on my grandparents' farm. The first day I was brought home from the hospital, I was brought home to my grandparents, and that's where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
I got my first horse when I was a year old. And of course, obviously, I don't remember the first day that I got him, but I was riding about the time I was walking, and I had a pony and a porch a little bit higher than this. And
Wow.
I don't remember this, but I remember my grandparents talking about how I would scoot to the edge of the porch and I would climb over onto his back, and he would walk circles around the house with me until he got tired, and he'd stop and I'd crawl back off.
All right, sorry folks, my camera overheated. It is a very hot day, like in excess of 95 degrees and extremely humid here in Kentucky. So now we're standing in some shade. You probably can't see the creek behind us, but there are lots of really fascinating things about the Jerry's farm, and that's Jerry's plural, by the way. I'm not like being weird about the way I say the word Jerry, but there are lots of really fascinating things here. And so we left off though, was we were talking about just how early of a life you lived in an agricultural family. Your grandparents farmed the way that you still farm today. Is that correct?
That's right.
Gotcha. Is there? I thought that was a blueberry. I'm like obsessed with fruit now. There are pawpaws and plum trees. I mean, it's crazy here. But I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about the rewards and challenges of the way that you farm, because you are one of the only people that farms this way in this county, outside of maybe
the Amish.
some of the Amish community. Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, that's pretty unique.
And I've actually had Amish tell me that I'm old-fashioned compared to them. So
Get that. An Amish person told him that he's old-fashioned. That's wild.
well, they had just gotten allowed to use weed eaters.
Oh, okay.
And I was still cutting with a scythe. And
That's wild.
they come over one day, and not only they'd seen me using my scythe, but I was cutting wood with a crosscut
Oh my gosh.
saw. And because we used to do volunteer work in the Red River Gorge,
Okay.
and we worked in the Clifty Wilderness area.
Love that place.
Then there's no power tools allowed.
Right.
So we would go in with crosscuts and axes and clear trails.
Yep.
And of course, I've used a lot of those old time tools and methods, and I was comfortable with it.
Sure.
And so, and we still do a lot of that here just for the
cool.
fun of it. But, I mean, given the choice, I'm going to take that steel chainsaw. But but there are times when I like using a crosscut saw, and I still do a lot of traditional woodworking. Like I just did an article. I'm a writer for Rural Heritage Magazine.
A fantastic publication, and you'll see how to get there in the description, but ruralheritage.com. Very easy.
And I just did an article for them about how to make your own plow handle, because I was needing a handle for my plow. And I've got enough of my grandpa in me that I don't want to pay these crazy prices for things. So I broke a plow handle in a horse-drawn walking plow. And I went out and I found an old extra handle in the barn. It was probably 60, 70 years old already.
Wow.
But it was solid, so I brought it out and I put it on the plow and I went back to work, and I think I plowed 3 or 4 furrows and broke it. And this wasn't looking good. So I drove to a guy down the road here that sells all kinds of wooden handles, and they're all factory made stuff.
Yeah.
And he wanted $40. And I'm like, that's crazy. And first off, it was a sawed out machine made handle, and it's never going to be as good as the ones that I would make myself, because when I make one, I would split the wood and dress it down to a board and then shave the grip on it and then steam it or boil it and bend it.
I remember seeing these pictures. That's why I'm saying yep. It's not that I've ever done this in my entire life, but I was reading
I think
this
you're
story.
holding out on me.
But yeah, I remember, because you use the big splitters so that the log.
The grain goes the entire length of the board, which becomes the handle.
Gotcha.
Where in his that are sawed, the grain runs out, and it's always going to make a weak place. So I came home when I went out in the woods and I cut a hickory tree and I split it.
Just cut a tree down.
Yep, and I split out a bunch of handle blanks and made a handle.
Wow.
And put my plow back together, and I went back to working. But that's a traditional type of woodworking, and I think that's
That's a challenge.
It's a challenge, but it's also, that's part of why I farm the way I do, is I like the independence. I don't want to be dependent.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I'm all for a local economy.
Yep.
And if there was a guy next door to me that was making plow handles that would suit my standards and the way that I make them,
You pay for it.
I would pay for it.
Yep.
And I'd probably do my best to barter. I'd try to swap some of my beef or something for that handle so that the cash doesn't change hands.
Sure.
Because I think a barter economy is a good thing. And everybody can do something. Anybody can do something.
100%.
And anybody can do something that has value.
Yep.
And it's going to have value to someone else.
Yep.
And things, I think, mean more when you're able to exchange that way rather than just plunking down cash. So that's part of that, why I do that old-timey type stuff.
Is there a name for your, like a name for your style of farming? Like, what is it? Just old-timey farming, or like traditional farming, or historic farming?
It's a lot of that stuff, and then it's not a lot of that stuff. That's a good Irish answer. It is and it isn't. But I'm sort of like, in that instance, I am in a lot of ways, I'm like the Amish. People think the Amish are all old-fashioned, and here they are out plowing with horses and driving buggies. But there's more to it, and when you start looking beneath the surface, they control their technology rather than allowing technology to control them. And when they bring something into their community, they take a hard look at it and they decide, is this good for the community? Is it good for everyone, or is it just good for me? And they allow things that make them a tighter knit community. I do the same thing, not from the standpoint of a community, because I don't have a community. I mean, I'm the only one around me doing what I'm doing. Right. And my community has become more national and global. Sure. Because I'm in contact through writing and through the websites and things of people around the world that are farming the way I do. But I don't have anyone local to talk to and compare ideas. Sure where I was going with that.
Well, I think, it was just all off the, how do you call it? How do you name it?
What I was going with was, I use a mix of technology. Like, I've got a 4-cart, which to anybody looking at it, well, that's just a cart pulled by horses, and it still looks old-fashioned. But if my grandpa had had something like that, he would have been amazed, because what I can do with that piece of equipment, it's a 2-wheeled cart with brakes and seats, and it lets me hook to any kind of tractor implement that I would want to hook to. And with mine, all I can do is I can drag it. Like, if I hook to a baler with a motor on it, I can pull it with a pair of horses and bale hay with a team.
The team are the mules, by the way.
Yeah, well, 2 mules. Or if I had a bush hog with a large mower of some sort with a motor on it, I could pull it behind the mules and mow with it. Gotcha. This piece of equipment allows me to pull more modern equipment. Gotcha. So that's a new thing. Yeah. And like, I've got the plow that I use. My plow was made in 1897. It was made by the Vulcan Plow Company in Indiana, and it's a wooden beam plow with wooden handles, and that's what I like about it. It's light. If the beam ever wears out, I can cut out a new one and put it back on there. Like I was just talking about, I can put new handles on it. It's all replaceable, and I can hook to it and keep plowing. I mean, none of this tractor equipment that's being made today is going to be in a serviceable condition in 130 years as what that plow is. Yep. So that
means something.
That means something, and like I said, that supports my idea of independence and sustainability. I mean, of course, obviously, I can't cross my mules and raise mules. Right. But as long as there's a horse and a donkey, I could raise mules. Yep. Of course, I haven't really talked about the reasons why you'd want a mule in the first place, and that's a whole other thing. Sure. All that plays into a sustainable type of agriculture. And we mentioned before, of course, it limits me somewhat. I'm limited by scale.
Because you either have to get more mules or
And-
bigger equipment or bigger mules
or another farmer. I mean,
another farmer to pull another set of team,
right.
I guess.
And I was being a little bit flippant when I said that any fool could crank up a tractor and
of course,
and go.
yeah, you were just joking.
But it's a lot easier in this day and age to find tractor drivers.
Yeah,
They could go out here and pull a bush hog around a field and mow.
sure.
Than it would be to find a man that could hook a pair of mules and get on a mowing machine and mow all day and be able to listen and keep the equipment in condition and not hurt himself and hurt the team. And
Right.
so there's a lot that plays into that makes it hard to get that help.
Yeah, it makes my head spin just thinking about it. Another thing that made my head spin today, before we get to the last question here, is just the amount of things. Like, you have a lot of diversity on your property. You have diversity in topography. You have an enormous, I don't know if you call it a biome or habitat of trees. Chestnuts you're growing. You've got some hickory. You've got pawpaw trees. It is honestly, it's bananas out here. Like, I want to be here indefinitely to get a agricultural certificate or master's. I mean, you're brilliant, and the spot that you've picked, which I guess we could save that for a different day, like how you got here.
Right.
But you grow so much and you've done so much. Could you just give us a brief rundown this is your job, this is
Right.
your life.
Right.
What from day one to today have been your big agricultural practices, as a not sustainable practices, but what were your crops or commodities that you were raising?
Okay. Now, we
as a
did raise
farmer?
tobacco for several years,
Mm-hmm.
and I know tobacco's a bad thing, and
Hey, it's a Kentucky thing.
It's a Kentucky thing.
This was our cash crop, so
I personally, I don't chew or smoke or anything like that, and
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't encourage anyone to use nicotine, but it's a fact of life. People do, and Kentucky has the climate for it.
absolutely.
And when we first came here to this farm, we were primarily focused on food. We were going to raise beef and pork and direct market that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all of our neighbors just were shocked that we weren't going to raise tobacco, because at that time everybody was growing tobacco.
And our state economy and policies really supported it at that time,
oh, yeah,
too.
Right. And I grew up working in tobacco, and I had a background in tobacco, and I hated everything about conventional agriculture as it revolved around tobacco.
Okay.
The chemical inputs,
Gotcha.
chemical fertilizer inputs, all of that. I can remember following a setter when I was a kid, probably 12 or 13 years old, and we had pulled, back then you had to pull plants. This was before the float beds and all that. And we'd pulled plants, and that's where you go into a tobacco bed where you raise the seedlings and you pull them all out by the roots, and you take them to the field and plant them in rows. Well, we had pulled plants. We pulled a bunch of plants, and then the weather changed and it started raining, and we couldn't get them in the ground quick enough. So we took them to the barn, and we stood some poles up, and we stood all those plants up between those poles to keep them upright. And then we carried water and poured under them to wet the roots and keep them alive until the ground would be ready to plant. So they sat there for a long time, waiting on the ground to get dry enough to work. And when the ground was finally ready, some of those plants had rotted. There was rotten spots in the plants. And my job was to carry the plants from the edge of the field to the people sitting out, riding behind the tractor.
Yeah.
And I'm running across the field with these armloads of plants, and those rotten plants are just oozing nicotine, and I'm absorbing that through my skin.
Oh my gosh, seriously?
Yeah. So about the third trip from the plants at the edge of the field to the setter, I get halfway and I just face plant and pass out.
Yeah, like a nicotine overdose.
Yeah, I overdosed. And when I came to, I was shivering all over, and I was white and sweaty, and started throwing up, vomiting, and
Oh man.
I was just miserable and ache all over. And I was convinced I don't want anything to do with this crop. If I can ever get out of tobacco, I'll never grow tobacco again.
And then here you are.
Well, and then we bought this farm, and my neighbors all come to me and say, well, you ought to raise tobacco. Tobacco will pay your taxes and make you so much more money per acre than anything else you can grow. And I said, well, if you can find me someone that'll buy organic tobacco I'll grow it. And I didn't think there was any such thing. I thought there's no danger of me ever growing tobacco because there's no such thing as organic. Well, about a week later, one of my friends calls me up and he said, I understand you're interested in organic tobacco. And I said, well, maybe. And he said, well, I got a guy who wants to meet. So we went and talked to this person, and they were a marketing individual for Santa Fe Tobacco Company, American Spirit.
Gotcha.
And they buy organic tobacco. And he said, I understand you want a contract. And I said, well, maybe. And I was really scared. I was, not wanting to commit.
You didn't think these people would ever materialize into actual people
and I think,
meetings.
Right. At that time, I think tobacco was bringing like $1.50 a pound, something like that. And he said, well, I'll give you a contract. He said, we'll start you at 1,000 pounds. And when you show me that you can make your contract, we'll increase your weight. And I said, well, what would you pay? And he said, well, we're going to pay you $3 a pound. And that just blew me away. That's double what everybody else is getting. And I said, well, what if I get more than 1,000? He said, well, there's a good chance we'll buy it. He said, but don't jump into it and raise more thinking that you're going to automatically get rich on this. But he said, there's no guarantee.
Right.
He said, we have quotas of what we need. And if we need it, we'll take it. That kind of thing. So I shook his hand and signed the contract. And we came home and we jumped right into thinking, how are we going to raise organic tobacco? And we figured it out. And we raised our own plants that first year. And we fed them with chicken manure for our fertilize. And we had some good ground that we thought would grow it. And I hauled out enough barn manure and spread it. And we raised it with the entire crop like they used to with our mules. And we had Amish help that came and would work with us. And our first year's crop, I think my acre made about 1,500 pounds.
Wow.
And so we get to the warehouse to sell it. And I took a lot of pains. My neighbors were commenting on that. He said, you got some of the prettiest bales I've ever seen. You're taking way too much trouble with this stuff. And I said, well, if I'm growing it and my name is attached to it, I want to take something in I can be proud of. And I want it to look like I was proud of it. And it worked out in my favor. We got it there, and the guy says, man, he said, I'm going to tell you, he said, that's some of the prettiest tobacco I've seen this year. And
that's everything.
Right.
For those of you who have never been in a tobacco warehouse, you literally have people going through your different sets of tobacco looking for quality.
Right.
They might just say, you know what, there's too many bad leaves in here, so we're just going to dismiss this entire bale. We're going to dismiss this entire box. So prettiness is it's a big thing.
Yeah, and they might, if they take it, even if it's bad, they may say, well, we'll give you a quarter a pound.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you can't refuse it because what are you going to do? You can't eat it.
Right.
And, So you take whatever they give you.
Yep. Yeah.
So the guy tells me, he said, that's the prettiest tobacco we've ever seen this year. And he said, you made your quota, we're going to give you a nickel a pound bonus. So I got $3.05 when everybody else was getting $3 in the program. And they took the entire 1,500 pounds. So that tickled me. They bought it all. And I said, I want more. So they did. We got bumped up to 5 acres. And of course, it wasn't all good years. We had some drought years and one thing and another. But it got to the point that we couldn't get help.
Yeah.
And it was that way with everything. We raised pasture poultry for a long time. And I got certified for what they call a USDA exemption, which meant that I could process chickens as long as I use a state inspected facility. I can sell chickens anywhere in the state of Kentucky, the same as USDA inspected. We did that for several years, and same thing, I just couldn't get help. So we've tried to limit ourselves to just what 2 or 3 of us can do by ourselves.
Gotcha. And what is that now? So now that it's not tobacco,
it's mainly beef and pork.
We saw there are lots of cool cattle up here. I didn't take a whole lot of video, but you all know that I love cows. And there are some bulls there too, and lots of different kinds. So mainly a beef operation here now.
Right. We do grass-fed, grass-finished. There's no grain in the cattle end of the business anyway. And we're a cow-calf operation. I started with a mixed herd. We bought grade cows,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that they were all different bloodlines and
Sure.
or unknown bloodlines. And I mainly bought for a type. And I was looking at a smaller frame cow and a cow that looked like she would do good on grass.
Okay.
And then we went with a breed of bull. I've always bought registered bulls, and we went with a breed called a Limousine.
Which earlier I asked if it was because that the bull is really long, and evidently not quite.
Yeah.
So can you explain what a Limousine type stock is?
Right,
Like,
yeah. Limousine cattle come from the Limousine region in France.
Didn't know that that was a region in France until today.
Yeah, and so that's where that comes from. And there's every breed claims this, but Limousine claims to be one of the oldest breeds that they supposedly trace back to the cattle depicted on the Lascaux cave paintings. And so, you know, I don't know if there's any truth in that.
Yeah.
But they are an old breed of cattle. In France, they were traditionally triple purpose. They were meat, milk, and draft. Of course, Americans have bred them for one thing only. It's strictly a beef animal. They bred the horns off of them, so they're a polled animal now.
Wow.
And the Limousine has a reputation of being a little bit wild, and we've kind of bred our herd for docility, to calm, easy handling animal.
Yeah.
Because we do most of our working on foot. I do some on horseback, but it's mostly on foot.
Yep.
And we like an animal that is fairly calm and easy handled, and which for us that's a plus, because like I said, we are so limited on help.
Yeah.
And that would be, I would caution anybody getting into farming, plan on what you can do yourself, because you don't have a lot of people lining up to take farm jobs.
Well, that's a good segue into, you know, I guess all of this is the point of the video, but in terms of anyone who's interested in getting into farming or living more of a homesteading type of life or having a small farm or whatever, here we've got a person who, of course, does it in a way that not a lot of people do it anymore, but who's done it for a long time. And I'm hoping that you're hearing him talk about the challenges of being 2 or 3 people.
Right.
To do it. But if you are interested, you know, what does it take to get into it, especially if you don't have the kind of background knowledge? Because you kind of skipped over some of the learning curve that certain people absolutely have to face, because you've been doing it more or less all your life. You know how to handle a mule, you know about trading horses, and there's a lot of background knowledge that you come into this with in the last 18 years that you've owned this particular place.
Right.
But if you don't have that background knowledge, you know, what are some of the key, I don't want to say admonishments, but the key things that people need to be on notice for if they truly want to get into farming, whether it's for themselves or on a semi-commercial level?
Well, the first thing is, you know, you need to have some kind of financial abilities, because you're not going to farm. I've had people come to me and think, you know, because they hear about all this organic, they see the prices on organic food, and they think it's selling exorbitant prices.
Yep.
And, you know, I've had people come to me thinking that it's going to be some kind of get-rich-quick scheme.
Yep.
And it's not. There is no get-rich-quick in farming. There's no get-rich in farming, unless you're, you know, some kind of conglomerate that.
Yeah.
You know, it's really, if you get into farming, in my opinion, you really need to go into it with the mindset first that you enjoy the lifestyle and for your own satisfaction. And if you make a profit beyond that, then call that gravy and go on.
Right.
And I'm not saying that you can't make a living from farming. You can, but
absolutely,
it's getting harder all the time.
Yep.
And if you don't have access to farmland, if you're not born into a farm family, just buying the land.
Yes.
Honestly,
workable land.
And you may not want to hear me say this,
no,
but it's, you know, with the prices on farmland today, it's nearly impossible to pay for a farm by farming. You just can't.
You need off-farm work. You need agritourism.
Right.
You need
You
need something.
You need a good plan.
No, I love hearing you say it, because sometimes when I say it, people think that I'm just being mean or unrealistic. But I mean, these are the types of people that I know that I'm talking to all the time that tell you these things, but
Right.
now you can hear it from the literal farmer's mouth. It's possible, but
It is possible.
You need the money to get started, which is a lot. But
Right.
then you also need other things, isn't it? I think I read somewhere that most farmers, at least in this country, I don't know about in Kentucky, but most farming families have off-farm jobs at this point.
Right. And you know, we do as well.
Yeah.
When we bought this farm, both of us, I was a cabinet maker. Actually, I was a CNC programmer in a cabinet shop. And we did, I was working 10-hour days with an hour and a half commute.
Yep.
And, you know, I would leave here at 4 in the morning, drive an hour and a half, work a 10-hour day,
Yep.
drive an hour and a half back, eat supper on the road, jump out, put on a headlamp, and go work on fence till 11, 12.
At night. Yeah.
I lost 40 pounds in the first month that we bought this place.
This is not a big man here.
Right.
I can't. I don't know what 40 pounds off of you would really look like.
We started eating a quart of ice cream every night
Wow.
to keep weight on.
Yeah.
Because I was losing so much weight so fast.
Yeah.
But it was with work. And this farm, we got a good deal on it, but it had been let go, and it'll never be what it could be, because it's a constant struggle.
You put out one fire here or solve one thing here, and there's something else going on.
Right.
Today, I think I have footage of this. He's doing a really cool, I don't know if it's a super secret project, so I'm not going to mention what it is, but his cows got into something that they were not supposed to be in, because they had trampled down a fence it's juice. It's got,
right.
a little electric shock to it.
Right.
Not very fun to get stuck by. So we had to go around and find all of the places where the fence had gone down, and he's got this cool buddy who's not with us right now.
Yeah.
Pete.
Yeah.
He's a little dog that he corrals when he wants to.
Here, Pete, bring her
and
back.
helped us get all the I should say him. This is not my farm, but we were walking through, and so he helped get all the cows out of the way. But there's always something.
Always.
That just was one thing today.
Right.
That's.
And that's another thing that people don't think about. When you buy a farm, and especially if you have livestock, you have a 24/7 commitment.
Yep.
And I've not had a vacation in 18 years. And I tell people every day is a vacation on the farm. And there's some truth in that. I love what I do, or I wouldn't be doing it.
Absolutely.
But you will never, if you're looking for monetary pay, you will never get paid for the hours you're going to invest. It's not going to happen. You do it because you love it. And of course, I want to know what I'm eating, and there's this other value.
Of course.
But I can't leave this farm.
Right.
In the back of my mind, I'm always thinking.
There's no dog sitter for your farm.
Right. What if the cows get out?
Yeah.
What if a fence is down? What if the pigs get into the garden? What if this? What if that?
Yeah.
And
those are all very real what ifs.
Oh yeah. This is things that have happened, or not just can happen. These are things that have happened.
Yep.
And there are a lot of things that are beyond your control, and they're going to happen.
Yep.
But like a tree falls on a fence, and an animal gets out and gets into the road, and things like that happen.
Yep.
If an animal gets into your garden and destroys or if you've got a cash crop, like when I raised tobacco, if the cattle got into the tobacco and ran through it and they tore all those leaves up, that's it's going to be a year before I have another good crop. It's just everything up to that point is gone. Yeah. And so you're there's a lot of responsibility riding on everything you do here.
Yeah.
And especially when you're a one-man operation, every little thing can blow up into a big thing in a hurry.
Yep.
So at this point, my camera overheated for the second time in the day, and Jerry and I had spent a lot of time together. I had taken enough of his time. He was incredibly gracious to have me there, but I decided to call it quits. We didn't want to have to stick my GoPro in the freezer again to wait for it to cool down to then walk back out and find a place to record. As we were wrapping up our conversation, Jerry and I were discussing two other concepts in terms of challenges. Jerry is a farmer, a full-time farmer, and that's how he earns his money. However, to get to the place that they are now has taken the entire 18 years that Jerry and Jerry have owned this farm. While they got it for a good deal, that good deal came at a cost of having to restore this farm, and it's continuing to be restored, but having to restore this farm to a place where it could be worked for that land to be productive. The other challenge that we discussed toward the end of our conversation was the idea of finding labor. The ultimate reason why this farm no longer produces tobacco is because there was no one to help with that tobacco production process. Tobacco is a very labor-intensive crop, and in order to make money off of it in today's time versus maybe 20 years ago, you need a lot of acreage for that tobacco. Whereas 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you might have had 30 acres worth of tobacco that could pay your property taxes or maybe even make you some actual profit margin. But today you need a lot more space to do that, and when you have a lot more space to manage, you need more hands in order to make that space work. And that's a huge consideration when you are looking at producing any type of crop or any type of commodity for a living. I do plan on visiting Jerry again so that we can go over what a typical day looks like for him. We didn't really get to get that on camera, unfortunately, but it will happen hopefully under cooler circumstances where 98 degrees plus humidity are not making my camera malfunction. So for now, thank you for watching. I certainly hope this is helpful. And as always, please leave your comments below or get in touch with me via email. And absolutely take a look at RFD television, which is the main visual aspect of Rural Heritage, which is something you should totally subscribe to, and check out their YouTube channel as well. Adios.